and welcome to the Be Courageous Summit. So happy you're here today to join us for our special guest. And the intention of that I created the series is to basically provide support and encouragement for anybody that's going through these challenging times right now. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our guest for today. He was sentenced to 65 years in a Texas prison. Damon West once had it all. Damon has a powerful and impactful story which has been featured both nationally and globally. At 20 years old, Damon was a Division I starting quarterback at the University of North Texas when he suffered a career-ending injury. He turned to hardcore drugs to cope with disappointments of life. After a fateful discussion during his incarceration with a seasoned convict, Damon had a spiritual awakening. The term "be a coffee bean" changed his life. Damon's story has been featured both nationally and globally. His second book, The Coffee Bean, co-authored with best-selling author John Gordon, became an instant bestseller and a part of Forbes' top 20 books you need to read to crush 2020. Take note of that. Damon is passionate about the coffee bean message and loves sharing how it changed his life and how it can change yours. Welcome, Damon.
Hey, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. So the coffee bean, everybody's wondering how the phrase "be a coffee bean" changed.
Right, because you hear "be a coffee bean" and you're like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. So here's where I first heard about being a coffee bean. Almost 11 years ago exactly. It was May 18th, 2009. A jury in Dallas County had just listened to 6 days of overwhelming evidence of my guilt of the crime of engaging in organized criminal activity to commit murder of habitation. I was a meth addict, breaking into people's houses for 3 years in Dallas. I was the head of a burglary crew, a burglary ring, if you will, that was operating inside of Dallas. And this jury listened to this testimony of witness to witness and victim after victim, and then law enforcement officer after law enforcement officer talked about this guy that once had it all. I was a starting quarterback in Division I college football in the 90s. Worked in Congress in Washington. I worked for government for president. I worked on Wall Street. And then I became a meth addict. And when I was a meth addict, I lost everything and I started breaking into people's houses. And when this jury is looking across the courtroom at me, they hate me. They hate my guts, and I get it. And so this jury went and deliberated for 10 minutes on my sentence. 10 minutes, Tracy. I don't know how much Law and Order you watch, but if a jury's gone for 10 minutes, that smokes you. When I came back in that courtroom and that judge said 65 years, which is a life sentence, it took my breath away. And my parents got one last visit with me before I got shipped off to prison. And my mother and father are still married, Trace. I didn't come from a broken home either. My parents have been married next month to be 52 years. So I came from a great family. My mom is a nurse, so she's used to traumatic situations. And she was the only one that could talk to my mom and my dad. And so my mom said, baby, debts in life demand to be paid. She said, you just got hit with one hell of a bill, too. She said, but you owe us a debt, too, Damon. She said, we gave you all the opportunity, love, and support to be anything you wanted to be in this life, and this is how you repay us. So here's the debt you're going to pay to us. She said, when you go to prison, you're not going to get one of these white hate groups, one of these Aryan Brotherhood type gangs because you're scared because you're the minority in there. She said, you were never raised like that. So you're not going to start seeing race now. And she also said, you will not get any tattoos while you're in there. And I mean, Tracy, I was in prison for almost 10 years, man. I did 7 years and 3 months of that life sentence before I made parole. And these guys want to tattoo every inch of your body inside prison, especially in maximum security prison. I tell them all the time, I can't do it. My mom said no. Because my mom said, no gangs and no tattoos. She said, you come back as the man we raised, or do not come back at all. And this is tough love coming from my mom. So I'm running around Dallas County Jail before they ship me off to prison. And I'm asking all these guys that have been in prison before, how am I going to survive? And every guy I talk to, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, they're telling me the same thing. You got to get into a gang. You're 33 years old, man. You're gang recruiting age. You're going to the worst part of the prison system where everybody in the building you live on has a life sentence. They call it the life sentence building. Man, make your life easy, West. Get into a gang. But there was this one guy, Tracy, this older African-American man named Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson, probably in his 60s. I didn't never get his real age, but he was probably in his 60s. He's what you call a career criminal. He'd been to prison 4 or 5 times. He was a seasoned convict. But he's a real positive guy. He's always walking around smiling. So Mr. Jackson came up to me one morning and he said, West, I've been watching how you're dealing with these knuckleheads and these dummies talking about getting into a gang. He said, don't listen to these fools. He said, but let me tell you what prison is going to be like. He said, you need to understand that prison is like a pot of boiling water. And he said, anything we put in that pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. And he said, I want to put 3 things in that pot of boiling water and watch how they change: a carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. So he goes to the progression, Tracy. He says, if I put a carrot in that pot of boiling water, he said, what happens to the carrot? And I said, well, the carrot turns soft, Mr. Jackson. He said, that's right. He said, the carrot went into prison hard, but the water of prison changed that carrot, turned it soft. He said, the carrot got beat, he got robbed, he got raped, he may have gotten killed. He said, you don't want to be the carrot. What's it?
Questions?
All right. He said, you don't want to be the carrot. And he said, what about the egg? I said, okay, well, the egg turns hard then, like a hard-boiled egg. He said, that's right. He said, the egg has a shell that protects it physically, but inside the egg is not okay. Because inside that soft liquid core, his heart has become hardened. He said, if your heart becomes hardened, you're incapable of giving or receiving love. And he said, if you're incapable of giving or receiving love, you have become institutionalized. And you will not come back as someone your parents recognize, because your eggshell will have swastikas tattooed all over it. He said, what about the coffee bean? And I had no clue. I mean, I didn't even have a good guess. And so he said, if I put a coffee bean in the same pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you have to change the name of the water to coffee. Because he said the coffee bean, the smallest of these 3 things, he said, small like you, had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot. And he said, everybody in life puts out energy, negative or positive. And he said, whatever kind of energy you put out, you attract back. It's called the law of attraction, right? So he said, you'll actually attract the same kind of energy you're putting out. He said, so if you want to walk around prison with a mean mug on your face and scowl, you want to try to look hard, what you'll actually do is attract harder inmates at you. You'll bring them into your world. And he said, where you're going, that can be a dangerous, even deadly endeavor. He said, but Wes, if you walk around that prison with a smile on your face and you let those guys know they're not getting to you, no matter what they do, they're not getting to you. He said, you'll change that prison from the inside out. He said, the best part about it is the other coffee beans in prison will find you because of your energy. And the last thing Mr. Jackson told me, Tracy, before I got on that prison bus in August of 2009 to be shipped off to prison, he said, go out there and go be a coffee bean. And so that coffee bean message it's like a secret I took with me in my pocket. Let me know that you know, if Jackson was right, that things were going to be okay, because the power in any situation is not on the outside influences around you. The power is inside you. And you have to choose to allow the outside influences to change you, but you built with that power inside you, and you have to tap into that. And right now, what's going on in the world, the coffee bean message is so apt, because the entire world's in a pot of boiling water right now, Tracy. And I mean, no one alive can tell you they've seen this before, because it's never happened. It's unprecedented in human history. But it's still one of those things that you have a choice of how you're going to respond to this right now. You could be like the carrot that gets soft and sad and weak, and certainly that happens to us. I've been the carrot before. Throughout this pandemic, I've been the carrot. Or you can be like the egg that turns hard and mad and mean. I've been the egg before too. I've been the carrot and the egg at the same time, Tracy. I mean, or you can choose to be like that coffee bean that transforms your world into a pot of coffee and looks for the opportunity inside of every situation. Because inside of every situation, inside of every tragic situation, inside of every obstacle, there are opportunities, and you have to find those opportunities. And there are opportunities all around you, even throughout this pandemic.
So the coffee bean, and most people love coffee. So it hits some of us at home a little more than others, but that's okay. So what does it take to be a coffee bean? I mean, what are the steps that you took to have that mindset of remaining resilient?
That's a good question. Because here's the deal. When I got to prison, if you read my book, The Change Agent, and it's my autobiography, The Change Agent, I mean, it literally, I go through the first 2 months of prison in there and talk about the brutality of it. Because when Jackson told me, when you get to prison, you're going to be faced with the biggest physical challenges of your life. I mean, your life is literally on the line. And he even told me, you don't have to win all your fights, but you do have to fight all your fights. And that's really a lesson in life. You have to know that you're not going to win all your battles in life, and you have to get back up. So when I got to prison, and it took about 2 months to survive the brutality of just having the right to exist in that place, I got to work with myself, because I had become the egg, and I didn't want to be the egg. And so I had to transform myself inside there. I really believe, and I always talk in terms of spirituality, because I know that people come to you from all kinds of different faiths, right? We're going to have a lot of different people from different faith backgrounds. So what I've found is that in my life, and I'm in a program recovery, I found that God, for the most part, doesn't reach down and just heal a lot of people. Not that I've seen, and not even in my life. But what God has done is he's put people in my life. And these people on the path of life are there to get you to a different station in life. Mr. Jackson was certainly one. There's another one that I met, another guy in prison. He was my first cellmate. His name was Carlos. And if you read the Change Agent, Carlos played a pivotal role in my life. In fact, he saved my life in prison. But Carlos was my first cellmate. He was a little Hispanic guy, about 5'2", a little bank robber from San Antonio. But don't let his size fool you. Carlos was a very dangerous dude. Carlos could hurt you fast. But Carlos was a real neat guy. I mean, he was very well read, very educated. And at night we would sit around talking in our cell. He had the top bunk, I had the bottom bunk, and we would talk about life and, you know, what we did to get there, what we wanted to do, transform our lives. So I'm telling him about the coffee bean one night. And he jumps off the top bunk and he gets real excited. He's like, man, that's great. I love the coffee bean thing. He said, but you're never going to get there with the way you think. And I said, what do you mean? He said, because the way you think determines the way you act. He said, and your thinking is going to get you the same results. He said, you have to change the way you think to change the way you act. He said that in anything that you have in life is just thought with no action. They're just thoughts. And you have thousands of thoughts a day. He said, but you want to make action. And he told me this riddle. He said, 3 frogs are sitting on a log, and one of the frogs makes a decision to jump. He said, how many frogs are left on the log? And I said, 2. And he said, you're wrong. He said, they're all 3 still on the log. Because that frog that made a decision to jump never took action to jump. He said, you need actionable thoughts in your life. He said, so what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to change the way you think. You've got to quit looking at prison as a punishment and start looking at prison as an opportunity. And there's that word again, opportunity, because you can't say it enough with what's going on right now. And I looked at Carlos again. He had a second head. I'm like, what do you mean opportunity, man? We're serving life in the Texas maximum security prison. This is punishment. He said, no. He said, this is the goal. This is your best opportunity in your life. Your opportunity to become the best human being possible. He said, you get a chance to work on yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and nothing can impede your progress but you.
Yeah.
He said, man, you got to take advantage of this. He said, if you'll get up every day and say out loud, thank you, God, for this opportunity today, and get your day started like that, he said, you'll change the way you think and you'll change the way you act. You will become that coffee bean. So one morning, Tracy, I got up and my feet hit the cold concrete floor of that prison cell, and I said it out loud. Thanks, God. Thank you, God, for this opportunity. And I went to work that day on myself. And I didn't even know if I believed it the first day. But I got it the next day and did it again. I started habitually just getting up and saying that and working on myself every day. Gradually, days became weeks, and weeks became months, and then months became years. But I transformed myself inside that prison. And I found out there's 5 ways really of becoming a coffee bean. And the first one was that you had to use positive body language. It's the thing Mr. Jackson practiced the entire time and what he told me about. So especially on days you don't feel like it, smile. But smile all the time, because your body language speaks volumes before you ever open your mouth. And people read body language for cues all the time. So the first thing that happens when you're smiling is you start feeling better on the inside because you've got that outward smile going on. And what happens when other people see you smile is they start smiling back. You're creating positive energy everywhere you go. And whenever people start smiling back, in a room full of smiling positive people, you really kind of give negative people 2 choices, one of 2 choices. Most negative people in a room full of smiling positive people, they get with the program and become positive because they want to be part of the tribe. We have an inherent feeling inside of us to want to belong and be loved. That's what we are as humans. We want to belong and be loved. We want to be part of the tribe. But there are people out there, the truly negative people, the hardcore, hard-boiled eggs, the ones you can't, no matter how much you do to try to find out where the pain is, wherever it is that causes them to be like they are and view life through the lens they view it, you can't penetrate that. And those truly negative people in a room full of smiling positive people, they get out of the room, they leave, they quit their jobs, they don't want to be, they don't hang around the water cooler anymore because no one's there waiting to gossip with them, And so if we will cultivate these cultures of positivity everywhere we go, then we'll find out that that'll spread, and that's good. The second rule about being a coffee bean is getting up every day and working out in 3 areas: spiritually, mentally, and physically. And this is a workout thing. I tell people all the time, this is, people that hear work out, they think about physically working out. It's just one phase of it. Tracy, in prison, Man, they had some of the biggest guys I've ever seen in my life. These guys could play pro football, pro basketball. They could have been wrestlers. They were giants. But all they were big bodies because all they did was work out their bodies. They didn't work out their minds or their souls. And so what you have to do every day is you have to find a workout regimen that works for you spiritually, mentally, and physically. And I'll give you an example of mine. I get up in the morning and I do prayer and meditation. And prayer, I always say to people, is when you talk to God, whatever you believe God is. And meditation is when you listen, because you got to wait for those instructions. And so I get up every morning and I just say the same thing to God. Hey, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize it when I see it. I don't want to miss that, right? And I go off on my day and I go to work and I look for opportunities to serve other people because, servant leadership is such a big part of my life. And mentally working out means what kind of books am I reading? What kind of videos do I watch? What kind of websites do I go to? What am I feeding myself mentally? Am I playing around on social media too much? Because all of that stuff takes me away from the here and now. And you have to be present every day to deal with, with obstacles and opportunities that are going to come your way. And you got to treat your mind like you would your body. If you were trying to get in shape and you wanted to eat the right foods and exercise, then you got to treat your mind like that. Put the right stuff in to get the right stuff out. We are what we eat. It's not just about food. It's about everything we put in. But we're talking about bodies. Look, I talk about opportunities all the time. The coronavirus, this may be your opportunity to get it back in shape physically. A lot of people, myself included, went through life and said, I'm just too busy to start that workout or too busy to start that diet, or I'm on the road all the time. It's hard to diet. Guess what? I'm not on the road anymore, Tracy. I'm not eating airport food. I'm not eating vending machine food. I'm not eating fast food. I'm not traveling 4 times a week anymore. I'm out of my kitchen. So what have I done? My wife and I make healthy food choices. She always really made healthy food choices before, but I'm here during the day now. And so we do that. We work out. We try to exercise a little every day. We do stuff together. But another important aspect of this physical part is getting enough rest, because now I'm not running from pillar to post all the time, and I can go to bed at a decent hour. And, but before I go to bed each night, I have like a second spiritual workout. That's when I have a conversation with God again. But I got some questions because I want to recap my day. And I want to know how I was. Was I a good person? Do I owe someone an apology? What did I do to put back in the stream of life? And do I owe someone an apology? Do I owe someone forgiveness? And that thing about giving people forgiveness, forgiveness thing is a two-way street, Tracy. And I don't want to take a resentment to bed with me, because here's the thing about a resentment that I learned. When you resent somebody, a person, a place, a thing, or institution, the chances are really good the person, place, or thing you resent doesn't know. So it doesn't affect them. And then the other thing I found out is when they do know, they don't care. So really, you're the only one that cares. You keep this stuff bottled up inside you, and it corrodes you from the inside out. There's a saying that I've heard one time that hate corrodes the containers contained in. So I want to get rid of that every night. That's part of my spiritual workout. I'm dumping that stuff off, and I'm letting go. I'm forgiving people, especially the ones that haven't asked for it. That's done. I'm not taking that with me to another day. The third rule about being a coffee bean is knowing what the secret to life is. And the secret to life, is not even about you. It's about what you can do for other people. It's called servant leadership. And servant leadership is helping other people achieve their goals in life, helping to raise other people up to a different station of life. Because when we're helping other people, that's when we're at our best. That's when we're really fulfilling our obligations and becoming human. And, if you look around, you're going to find opportunities, even at a social distancing standpoint, to be of service to other people, because so many people are in need. I tell people a lot of times a story about Mr. Rogers. Did you watch Mr. Rogers growing up? Did you watch?
That's gonna date me if I say that. That's gonna
Huh?
that's gonna age me if I say that. No, I did.
Well, I did. I'll be 45 in October. So, but I watched Mr. Rogers growing up, and it was in the 70s and 80s. And before Mr. Rogers was Mr. Rogers, though, he was a Presbyterian minister, and he was at a church service one Sunday. He said there was a substitute preacher there, and that preacher went on and did his sermon. And he said at the end of the sermon, Mr. Rogers thought to himself, "That was the worst sermon I've ever heard." He said it was awful. He said it almost put him to sleep. He said it went against every rule of giving a sermon. And just as he was about to tell the lady next to him how awful this guy was, he stopped. He bit his tongue, because the woman next to him, he said, was in tears. And she turned to Mr. Rogers and she said, "That was the most beautiful sermon I've ever heard." It was the absolute right thing I needed to hear at the absolute right time in my life. And that's when Mr. Rogers realized that every one of us can be a messenger of hope, of peace, of love, of serenity, that no one person can reach everybody, but everybody can reach one person. But he also learned another important lesson that day. He learned that while he was coming in judgment, she was coming in need. And I think right now you're going to find so many are coming in need, and it's finding ways to fill that need. But it fills a need in us too, to be out there and be of service to other people. So servant leadership is rule number 3. Rule number 4 is knowing what you do and do not control. And I learned this in a recovery meeting, Tracy, in prison. And you and I were talking about recovery before the show started. So I go into this meeting. It's an AA group, a 12-step group in prison. And they start the meeting off with this thing called the Serenity Prayer. And the Serenity Prayer, are you familiar with the prayer, Serenity Prayer?
I am.
Yeah. So it's God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So this guy bringing the meeting in from the outside world, he comes in, he draws a line from one side of the chalkboard to the other. And he says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And he said, the things you cannot change, Damon, are on God's line. He said, and that line represents God's line, but God's line is bigger than that. It's infinitely long. He said, you can't fathom the size of it. And he said, every time you tried to grab something off of God's line, he said, you hurt yourself or you hurt other people. He said, so stay off of God's line. And then he went and erased a little inch out of God's line, Tracy, and he held his fingers up an inch apart. And he said, if God's line is infinitely long, your line is to scale. You get 1 inch of that infinitely long line. And he said the second part of the prayer, the courage to change the things I can. He said the things you can change, the things God gives you to work on, the things you can't control, there's 4 of them on your little bitty line. And he said that little bitty 1 inch line represents humility, because he said humility is defined as being right-sized. He said, so knowing your place in the world is important. And he said, and on your little humble right-sized 1 inch line are the 4 things you control. He said, you control what you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. And he said, if it's not what you think, say, feel, and do, you don't control it. And it's not even on your line. He said, so stay off of God's line. And he said the last part of the prayer was the most important for us addicts, is that it was the wisdom to know the difference between that big line and that little line. Because I get so hung up on this all the time. There's a chapter in my book, The Change Agent. There's an entire chapter called Not on My Line, because I have to remind myself of this all the time. To be a coffee bean, you got to remember your place, man. You can't go jumping over on someone else's line, because that's not your place. Your place is to work on those 4 things in your life. And in prison, it took me a little while to buy into this. I mean, it took me more than a little while, because, man, in my mind, I'm Damon. I have all these levers I'm pulling. I'm manipulating the world, right? I mean, I'm running the entire world from my prison cell. No, but I mean, that's just that fantasy in your head as an addict. But when I did finally concentrate on using all my energy on those 4 areas, when I think, say, feel, and do, my life took off, Tracy. First, it was the inmates that noticed. Then it was the guards, and then it was the parole board. And in November 16th, 2015, the parole board came to visit me. And this lady looking through my file, she's like, Mr. West, we don't see a lot of people come through like you. You had this amazing background, amazing life before this, and then you went off and you got hooked on drugs, and you started making victims, you committed crimes. Then the jury gave you a life sentence. She said you got too much time for sure, but you didn't come to prison and let that define you. You changed yourself inside this prison. She said, hell, you changed the prison around you. She said, I've really got one question for you about your parole. And she said, if you could be remembered for being anything in this life, she said, give it to me in just one word, go. And I mean, because I was a coffee bean, because I was a servant leader, because I worked in these things and I believed in these things, because I worked out on myself spiritually, mentally, and physically every day, because I practiced all these rules of positivity, and I had her answer for her. I fired it back real quick. And I said, useful. I just want to be useful. And I can be useful in this prison still, or I can be useful out there in that world finding those coffee beans. And they let me go. They said, we're going to give you 1 shot. We're going to let you go. But if you come back anywhere between now and the year 2073, we're going to keep you until 2073 this time. So I'm on parole the rest of my life, Tracy, but I really don't worry about that, because as long as I'm in control of what I think, say, feel, and do, I'm not going back to prison. I don't have to worry about prison, because I learned what the 5th rule of being a coffee bean was when I got out of prison. And the 5th rule about being a coffee bean is both a message of hope and a warning. Because the 5th rule about being a coffee bean is that your past does not define you. Your past wins don't matter. Your past losses don't matter. man, your past is your lesson. You can learn from your past and you can teach others with it. And my life is an example of that. I teach others with my past, as a warning of what not to do. So, but it's also a message of hope. Your past is your lesson. The present, today, is a gift. We got to make the most of the day. We got to find ways to put back into that stream of life and be the best human beings possible. And the future is your motivation. Here's the warning. You got to motivate yourself with the right stuff, because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in a situation that's going to be a big letdown in life. And look, I did 7 years and 3 months in a maximum security penitentiary here in Texas. I go all over the country speaking, and I go to prison systems in different states because I like going inside and speaking to the inmates. I think I have a unique currency to spend with the incarcerated. I bring them hope. And today, Tracy, I went back and got my master's in criminal justice when I got out of prison. Today, I'm a criminal justice professor at the University of Houston downtown. I teach a college class, Tracy, called Prisons in America. Prisons in America. What world? And 4.5 years ago, I was in a prison in America. And now I teach college students about prison. So I can tell you with authority that I know what the toughest prison in America is. And the toughest prison in America is the prison in your mind. Mm-hmm. I meet more people out here that are locked up than I ever did when I was in prison. Yeah. More people are in prison by their thoughts and by their things than by steel bars and barbed wire and concrete. You can take that to the bank. And the way you keep yourself from becoming a prisoner is to not put your value, your identity, your self-worth into things that you can lose when there's an economic downturn, when there's a pandemic, or when there's a prison sentence. And prison comes in many different forms, So if your job, your home, your car, these are the things you idolize, these are the things you put in front of you for your value, you're in trouble. And then you're going to be in trouble at some point, if not now. But if you'll shift that into a mentality of putting value and self-worth into things like, here's what I use. The things I value, my relationship with God, my faith, my relationships in life. These relationships you make in life are the most important things you're going to have. And then my ability to serve other people. Nothing, no pandemic, no economic downturn, no prison sentence can take away those three things. And I've tested it out inside of maximum security prison, and I still have those three things, Tracy.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story, Damon. Thank you for sharing that and all the fabulous lessons you learned through that journey, which I know was challenging, but yet beautiful at the same token, right? Yeah. So, as we know, being in isolation, I've heard people say, I'm in prison in my own home. And a lot of people are looking at it like that. And also the mental prison, right? So here you've got these viewers who are listening. Some of them feel like they're imprisoned in their own home or dealing with these, whatever's going on in their mind, the stories, the fear, and whatever. Step into that one more time and share, another little tidbit on what they can do at this particular moment behind their four walls to get themselves to be that coffee bean.
Absolutely. The first rule that Carlos told me, the first rule about doing time is you have to do your time. You can't let your time do you. And that means you have to fill your day up with things you want to fill it up with, or your day is going to fill up around you. And it may not be the things that are the best for you. And look, everybody talks about doing time. That's cool. Physically, are you like doing time in prison? No, but prison is not always a physical thing. Like I just said, more people out here that are locked up. And so many people I've heard from have said they feel like they're in prison. So, okay, you feel like you're in prison, then let's figure this out. First of all, you have to get into a routine. Consistency is key when you're doing time. You want to do some time? Good. Get into a routine. It's what I had to do too. So that routine means that you get up at the same time every day that you were getting up before this stuff happened, because you're not on vacation. Because here's what happens if you start giving into that voice that says sleep in or don't do this or just do things as you want. I'll give you an example. I statements are great. I woke up one morning, it was last week or 2 weeks ago, and the day before, a deal that I was working on didn't go through. And it was a lot of money. It was something I was hoping would happen. It didn't go through, and I was really disappointed about it. I told my wife about it that night. So I woke up the next morning, and I told my wife, I was like, you know what? I'm tired. My wife's a nurse practitioner. She's at work every day. She's on the front line. And so I woke up, and I get up at the same time every morning, right before 6 o'clock, I'm getting up and we're waking up. I'm going to make her tea. And I'm like, you know what? I'm tired, Kendall. She's like, hey, why don't you just sleep in today? You could just sleep in. And I popped up out of bed because here's what happens. If I sleep in, if I give into that, I don't know where that goes next because I don't know if I'm really tired or if I'm depressed or what's happening. But I know that I have a routine. And if I deviate from that routine, it scares the hell out of me because now I've given in to something. Now I've given in to that voice that says, you know, lay it down right now. And the more you lay it down, the more you quit, the more you give in, the easier it becomes to do that. And the harder it is to get back on track. So my advice is to get up at the same time you were doing it every day beforehand and get ready. Get ready to start your day. And your day, you know, your day's not going to be the same as it used to be, but get up and get ready. Make yourself feel good. You know, do your hair, do your makeup, brush your teeth, shave, do the things that normal people do when they get up and get ready for work. And put on, you know, put on an outfit. I would say don't run around in your pajamas all day, but I you know, if you're doing that, that's comfortable for you, that's great. But for me, I have to put on clothes. I have to put on shoes and socks and everything else because I've got to convince myself, hey, my job now is to go out and speak to people on Zoom calls and do this kind of stuff all day long and I'm giving away the coffee bean message, what I normally get paid to do when I speak, because I think that's my purpose right now. My purpose is to go out there and spread this message of positivity that I think people need so much. And it gives me a sense of purpose and I can be useful. And I would encourage everybody to find ways to be useful every single day. You know, one of the ways, Tracy, to be useful right now in this pandemic that everybody can do and it costs you nothing is call one person every day. FaceTime call. Do something where they can see your smiling, positive face and ask these people, whether it be a friend, a neighbor, a relative, whoever, ask them how their day's going or how they're dealing with all this. And don't volunteer about your stuff. Be an ear to listen. Make it about them, you know, because being an ear to listen, that's some of the best servant leadership work there is, man. Service work comes in all kinds of different forms. You know, somebody once asked me if you could have a superpower, what would it be? And I told them to listen, to be able to listen without, you know, without interrupting that listening with my own thoughts and my own ideas and interrupt. Because being an ear to listen gives somebody the comfort and the peace of knowing that they have been heard. And every one of us can do that to one person every single day.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Damon, so much. That was a very powerful message. And I know that everybody out there appreciates what you've shared. And Damon has offered to provide a couple of copies of his books that we're going to be giving away. So somehow we'll figure out a link to put at the bottom of this page that they could sign up to be involved in that drawing. And yeah, so we will put that out there and check him out on his website, which
DamonWest.org is my website. Twitter and Instagram is at DamonWest7. And look, if you want to buy my books, they're also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, anywhere where books are sold. I mean, it's The Change Agent and The Coffee Bean. And The Change Agent, Tracy's being made into a movie right now. It'll be a Netflix series. It'll either be 8 or 10 episodes for a limited series. So it'll be pretty cool.
Perfect. So read the book before it comes out on a movie or series.
Right.
Well, thanks again, Damon. And I send my love out to everybody there that's watching this. And in the meantime, be courageous. Signing off with love and light.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks.